few days ago. We'll have pictures of that on an oil depot in Benghazi in Libya. The continuing instability and accompanying slowing of production there is hitting investor confidence. Well, in Spain, fears of a shortage in oil supply has caused the government to take innovative measures. Sonia Gallego explains.
There's a change of pace happening on highways throughout Spain. Across the country, drivers are being encouraged to ease off the pedal, and it's all in aid of conserving energy. The unrest and uprisings experienced in oil-rich Arab countries have meant a surge in the price of petroleum, spelling trouble for countries dependent on imports.
Well, we are pretty sure, because we have made a lot of studies dealing with this problem, and our conclusion is that we save at least 0.7 liters per 100 kilometers.
Around 80% of the country's energy relies on imported oil and gas. That's a fifth above the average for the entire European Union. So for the next 4 months, the speed limit on Spain's highways goes down from 120 kilometers per hour to 110. That, says the government, will reduce oil imports by 5%, saving the country just over $3 billion.
Well, Libyan oil currently accounts for just over 13% of Spain's demand. And while Spain's oil supplies are in no danger just yet, the reduction in this national speed limit is just one of the ways that the government is trying to get people to cut down on fuel. And that's a scenario that's not been seen in this country since the 1973 oil crisis.
Also approved increased use of biofuels, a modest reduction in train fares, and subsidized tire exchanges. But with a sluggish economy still struggling its way out of the recession, the measure hasn't exactly been welcomed with open arms, with many seeing it as a ploy to distract the country from other problems.
I think that there are more important things that the government should be concerned with, and they shouldn't be wasting people's time and money on this.
It is laughable. It doesn't really contribute anything to the economy in general, if that is what it's about.
While oil prices remain high, the debate goes on over what alternatives there are for Spain's energy consumption. A sign of the times in an increasingly shaky climate. Sonia Gallego, AlJazeera, Madrid.
Well, one of the countries still purchasing oil from Libya is China. They've also suffered heavy economic losses from damage done to the infrastructure on the ground there. Melissa Chan joins me now live from Beijing. Melissa, as countries are trying to place trade embargoes and all kinds of sanctions against Libya and its oil, what's China doing about it?
Well, it's quite interesting because China appears to be quite schizophrenic on the issue. First, we do know that it appears that they're continuing to purchase oil from Libya. One thing to point out is that China has never been a major purchaser of oil from Libya. Europe actually was the #1 purchaser of oil from Libya. But having said that, it's a real realpolitik attitude that Chinese are taking. They have backed the measure at the UN to ask the International Criminal Court to investigate possible war crimes in Libya, and that is quite rare for the Chinese to do. I mean, they don't usually tend to condemn countries at the UN Security Council. It's something that is part of their foreign policy, not to get involved in another country's domestic affairs. But here you see the Chinese quite angry because they have had to evacuate their citizens. They have had their enterprises in Libya affected by what's going on.
That's right, Melissa. Usually China does not interfere, especially when they have commercial interests in the country. And you say China's not a huge buyer, but they need all the energy they can get. So as a member of the Security Council, how are they balancing their commercial and political interests?
Well, China is really based on commercial interests when it comes to its foreign affairs dealings, rather. I mean, you can see this in what's happening. On the one hand, they're demanding an investigation in Libya to what has happened to their enterprises in that country. There are billions of US dollars at stake. State-owned companies in Libya have been involved in infrastructure and oil refinery projects, and they're clearly upset, or else they wouldn't have acted the way they did at the UN. At the same time, they're still purchasing oil. Like I said, it's a very realistic and pragmatic approach they're taking to it.
Melissa Chan, live for us in Beijing. Thank you. Other news now, and protesters in Egypt say they've been attacked by security services and armed men in plain clothes. The demonstrators had been trying to storm a government building looking for sensitive documents linked to Hosni Mubarak's regime. Amin Mohaldeen has more from Cairo.
Outside the towering Ministry of Interior, they gathered, demanding access. But on Sunday evening, as the crowds grew, so too did the tension. The Egyptian military, under strict orders to prevent crowds from storming the sprawling security complex, fired warning shots into the air. The situation further complicated with the arrival of armed men, who the protesters described as former regime loyalists that tried to attack the crowds. Earlier on Sunday, the prosecutor general had ordered all state security buildings sealed. That decision came after protesters stormed the operational headquarters of the state security in another Cairo suburb. There, they found documents, police records, underground rooms, and even a passageway that led to a secret living quarter they claimed was used by the powerful Minister of Interior, now standing trial. They also found bags of shredded documents. With the recent departure of the Mubarak-appointed Prime Minister Ahmed Shafiq, protesters feared that state security officials would attempt to destroy all evidence that would implicate them. After protesters stormed this massive state security compound behind me, Egypt's new prime minister asked anyone with incriminating evidence or documents to hand them over to the military so that they can be used in the prosecution of former regime officials. Documents like these, obtained by Isra Abdel Fattah, who was detained by state security twice for her political activism, show how state security was spying on her, even hacking into her email accounts to find out which organizations she was involved in and who she was in regular contact with.
These records show they were extremely paranoid from us. Every piece of information that for us seemed insignificant would be significant for them. They were convinced that there must have been some international organization behind my activities.
That sense of paranoia led state security to act with impunity for years, many say. State security was often accused of corruption, extortion, and torturing activists and citizens alike. Hussam Hamallawi was tortured while in the custody of state security.
State security has to be dissolved completely, not restructured or frozen, but to be dissolved. Secondly, every single officer and corporal and agent and informer in that agency must be put on trial.
Today, on the walls of the abandoned complex that came to symbolize the oppression Egyptians endured under the previous regime, a simple message left by the protesters. This is the fate of the oppressors. Ayman Mohaldeen, AlJazeera, Nasser City.
An Egyptian cabinet reshuffle announced on Sunday will see 3 new faces in key posts. The Prime Minister's office named Nabil El Arabi as the country's new foreign minister. He's a former judge at the International Court of Justice and was a permanent representative to the UN. Meanwhile, the new Interior and Justice Minister